So you saw on that last map and the map before it how quickly these empires expand, either absorbing people or more often than not conquering them. Well, as they come in contact with these folks, whether through conquest or absorption, one of the smart policies of the Umayyads is that they adopt things from the people they conquer. You might think about how the Vedic people adopt ideas related to agriculture from the holdovers of the Harappan civilization, for example. And so, for example, the Sassanids, the area that had been Persia, people there were particularly good at developing underground canals that are called qanats that reached underground sources of water called aquifers for irrigation. And at areas where particularly abundant aquifers were found, you could create major cities, places like modern-day Baghdad and Basra, which will become important. They also serve as major trading outposts like Mecca and Medina had been. In Egypt, they learn how to use something called the shadoof. I love that term, which, remember, if you go back, we kind of introduced it very briefly, relates to more or less something on a fulcrum that can be used to pull water out instead of just dipping buckets in. They understand how to plant and harvest based on the flooding of the Nile. Throughout their empire, they grow wheat, they grow barley, lentils, beans, flax, cotton, melons, sesame, sugarcane, incorporating lots of new types of agricultural products in areas that had not seen them before because they can take them from one part of their empire to the other. So things like cotton in Egypt, for example. One really important innovation I've got kind of as a line drawing here is known as the sequia. It is an animal-powered wheel that moves water to canals. It's inexpensive, it is easy to operate, you hook up a horse or a camel and you have them walk around. It's great for small landowners, and especially people who move to the Iberian Peninsula or modern-day Spain, they use it a lot. They can now bring agriculture to areas that had not been able to sustain it before. Another result of this massive expansion and conquest is an ease of travel through these territories. And remember that Muslims had been traders beforehand, so they already have trading routes through many of these areas. It makes it easy to go either through caravans or by ship. This connection between East and West, going from more or less India all the way to Spain, transmits technologies with great ease. Right? So tons of new crops, like I mentioned, are established throughout Islamic lands. Oftentimes this is called the Arab Green Revolution. You bring into places like North Africa, Egypt, even to Spain, things like rice, sorghum, which those of you who are familiar with raising animals might know is great fodder for things like cows. Sugarcane, cotton, watermelons, eggplants, spinach, artichokes. Citrus fruits make their way to Europe because of Islamic civilizations. Bananas, plantains, mangoes, all sorts of new crops which create a healthier, balanced diet, new small industries. Great advantage for these folks. Another thing that's important here is exemplified by that weird little image I've got at the bottom. Textiles, cloth production, is the basis of the economy of much of the Islamic world. And this makes sense thinking about where these folks come from. If you are Bedouin nomads moving from place to place, you don't build a lot of furniture to take, right? It's a pain in the butt to move. So what are your houses made out of? Cloth. They're tents. What do you sit on? Cloth. Rugs. What do you wear? Cloth, right? So the textile industry becomes particularly important to these folks. Cloth is used for all those things I talked about. Tents, clothing, rugs, wall hangings. There's also a scarcity of wood in the desert, no surprise there, which means that these things take the place of furniture. A lot of these textiles are made from wool, from linen, which is a plant, from silk, from cotton. Those things are native to Asia and incorporated into the empire. And there's a really interesting relationship between political power and textiles. So what we have at the bottom here is something called taraz. It is an Arabic word derived from the Persian word for embroidery. And this is a system that started in the 600s, the 7th century. Basically, the government created state workshops that produced long, beautifully worked strips of embroidery with particular things sewn into it, right? So things like the ruler's name or sayings from the Quran. And because these are state workshops, they are controlled by the ruler, by the caliph. And that means that the caliph distributes these pieces of textile to individuals. So what that means is what you're wearing, what you're making your tent and your rugs out of, if it has the right terms on it, if it's made in these state workshops, that also reflects where you are in society and reflects whether you're important or not, whether you're on the ruler's good side. And it's kind of a small thing, but it shows how these textiles become particularly important. In addition, some things that I don't have exemplars of here, the Umayyads become known for their pottery, for their glass and metal crafts, for making containers, armor, weapons, tools, utensils, precision instruments, fantastic coins, normally with sayings from the Quran stamped on them, jewelry. They don't have lots of natural tin deposits, so much of what they create is made out of bronze because tin has to be imported from either Asia or from England. And getting to right about the time where they falter, there is in 750 a revolt by a guy by the name of Abu al-Abbas. He is a descendant of Muhammad's uncle, so he connects himself back to Muhammad through a linear family tree, and he creates a new empire called the Abbasids. Before we move on to them, let's think real quickly about the Umayyad legacy on the next slide.